0 Hour has returned before the launch of the final shape, and with it, lots of challenges for newer and solo players. With some complaining that the reprised 0 Hour mission is bugged, Bungie has actually come in to say, this is how hard it's supposed to be. That means for those of you that are chasing the new crafted Outbreak perfected with the new roles of Head Seeker, Rewind Rounds, or Rapid Hit, that means you're going to have to take on the challenge. But no worries, in this video, I am going to show you surefire, guaranteed tactics that will work every time so anybody can clear 0 Hour. And of course, like usual, I'm not going to use any raid gear, I'm not going to use any crazy strats, I'm going to show you exactly where to stand and what to do so that anybody can beat 0 Hour easily on legend mode. Of course, these strategies also do work on normal mode, but the jumping puzzle is going to be a little bit different, but we're going to cover that in the video. First up, let's show you your build and every piece of gear that you will need. In this video, I'll be using a Warlock. However, if you're interested in using a Titan or a Hunter, I do have videos for that coming along the way, so make sure you subscribe for those as well as more Destiny 2 content. We're going to be using our Solar Warlock on the Daybreak super ability. We're going to be using two primary exotics. We're going to be using Dawn Course, which will improve our Scorch effects and Daybreak projectiles along with that super, but we're also going to be using the Rain of Fire leg armor exotics. This will allow us to air dodge and reload our weapons, which will be critical for the opening area. As always, you're going to want to make sure that you have at least 100 resilience on your stats. If you can get a little bit more of discipline for your healing grenades or things like that, that is the best in slot. But also make sure you get your intellect stat as high as possible because we're going to use our super in critical moments to make sure that we get things done. I'm going to be using 3 solar surges as well as time dilation and powerful attraction in case if I create some orbs from a distance, those powerful attraction mods will pull it towards me and allow me to do more damage. I'm also going to be using solar loader. If you want to, you can use focusing strike, but definitely you want to use heavy ammo finder and solar siphon. Now for our aspects and our fragments and our abilities, we're going to want to be using a healing rift for certain sections of this. Some people do enjoy using Phoenix Dive. If you are comfortable using that, you certainly can, but I find that for this, we're going to turn ourselves into a little bit of a solar turret, and using a healing rift at moments is going to help. If you're comfortable using Phoenix Dive, feel free to go ahead. Use your jump of your choice. You could use Celestial Fire or your Incinerator Snap. I find that distances here are a little bit longer, so using Celestial Fire for a longer distance is going to work better. And of course, a healing grenade. For our aspects, we're going to be using Icarus Dash to help with the jumping puzzle, as well as Touch of Flame. For our fragments, this is the most important thing, getting this together with our Dawn Chorus. We're going to be using Ember of Char, where our solar ignitions spread Scorch to affected targets. Also, we're going to apply more Scorch stacks to targets with Ember of Ashes. Next up, Ember of Empyrean for the increased restoration and radiant effects when you're using solar weapons or ability final blows. And then Ember of Eruption. This is going to be huge because the extreme ignitions that they have when you get the Scorch stacks to proc will cause a ton of damage, which will help, especially with the bigger enemies like the Briggs. That will work really well. In conjunction with Polaris Lance, that's going to be really good, especially if you are hitting critical hits on certain enemies. You can also use Sunshot for certain sections, but for the boss, we're going to be using Polaris Lance. We're going to be using a Mountaintop. You can use a Mountaintop of whatever choice you have. I've got Overflow and Frenzy. I also change between Implosion Rounds and Sticky Grenades. If you want to use either of those, it is totally fine. Next up, for our machine gun, I'm going to be using a fixed odds. I have completed this solo flawless with a number of different choices as well if you don't have fixed odds. There's the Trials machine gun called Unwavering Duty, and then there's the Avalanche machine gun, which was from the Dawning. I like fixed odds because it does an insane amount of damage and it can be enhanced to be enhanced incandescent, which will help you with the Scorch stacks. You can get incandescent on these other weapons, but this is going to be your best. You earn it from the Duality Dungeon. However, I have used these and you can certainly use these and they are serviceable, but this will be really, really solid and you'll see how it works in the video. For the build at the end, we're going to be switching to a different build that involves Dragon's Breath. We're going to use Dragon's Breath in combination with our Dawn Course to absolutely melt the tanks that spawn up at the end, as well as the final boss Brig. Using Dragon's Breath will cause a significant amount of damage. For your energy weapon, I find some type of a weapon with which shoot to loot is going to be really nice, especially if you have ammo on the ground and you just want to shoot those bricks to pick them up while you're moving. Refill your Dragon's Breath and you can do more damage. When you're doing the jumping puzzle, you can use basically the same type of build that you were using for the opening with Rain of Fire. If you want to go to something like transversive steps to help your sprinting to get a little bit more speed, you certainly could. I also put on a sword to make sure that the jumping sections are a little bit easier, especially a lot of people struggle with that section. So using a half-truths or any kind of a weapon that's got eager edge might help you get a little bit more speed if you're chasing Trevor down. Before we start with the main run, I do need to let you know about a cheese that does exist in 0 Hour right now. One of the hardest challenges about this mission is the timer. There's a few times in the mission where the actual mission objective will go away and then the timer will reappear on the map. What happens is if you load into a new instance right at the moment where that timer goes away, when it's at 0 seconds or 001, and you head to a new area, what will happen instead is that the timer will be completely removed and you can take as much time as you want to complete the mission. And this works on normal and legend mode. However, Bungie loves to patch things, especially on hard solo missions like this. So I recommend that you just learn how to do it normally. And if you do choose to cheese it and it doesn't work, don't take it up with me, take it up with Cheese Forever. Instead of splicing through a bunch of different pieces of it, I'm basically just going to narrate the run and go over all the things I'm thinking about as I run this. One of the very first things I do when launching is I put on a triple Solar Reserves chess piece before I even get started. Then when I land, I just quickly switch back to it, and then I've got all my reserves plus all of my different resistances and things that I need for the mission. All right. First things to do, when you get into this area here with this first group of enemies, we're going to maximize all of our solar explosions that we can, trying to get lots of ignitions. First thing, throw a healing grenade to make sure that you are set with restoration, and then start to just lightly cook everything. When these marauders come around the corner, save most of your ammunition for them. Dodge reload to make sure you get all of your ammo back, and then just start again to lightly cook these folks. What you did see there when I started, and it was pretty quick, is I threw a melee at all the enemies to make sure that I'm radiant. That will allow me to get a little bit more in terms of scorch stacks to kill more of the enemies. Now you're going to see more of those solar ignitions help out a little bit later into this area. Whenever you're running out of ammo with this, dodge reload to make sure that you're ready to go with a full stack for your LMG. Now I approach this area over here to the right and clear these enemies here, because then I've got a full area of full cover where I can do lots of damage and stay alive. Put a rift down if you need to, but you can see I've got plenty of space. I'm not in danger at all from the snipers or the brig on the right hand side. Now here's a perfect example of allowing ignitions to do the work. Right there you see that those two shanks explode. I didn't have to do any extra damage, I just applied enough scorch stacks. Now with these snipers up on top, you can either use your mountaintop or you can use your LMG. It depends on what you want to do or what your ammo capacity is at this point. I'm not really worried about it because I just want to cook these enemies as quickly as possible and get my super. Once I've got my super and I've cleared most of these enemies, then I can engage that brig on the right hand side. Again, I'm going to keep him off to the side and do a little bit of damage. One thing I did not do is I did not melee him with my solar ability to weaken him, which is the reason why here this takes a little bit longer than it should have. Here you can see I have to open it up and then I have to use Polaris Lance to cook him just a little bit more. The nice thing about Polaris Lance, and this will help us at the end, is that every time a solar ignition happens, it stuns the enemies, which is something you really want to make sure that you're using with Polaris Lance. All right, now we're going to come up into this next section. This area has a couple of little weird things going on with it, but luckily it's a lot easier than you used to do. Some people use their super right off the rip and clear a bunch of enemies over to the left, but instead I'm going to hold on and use that when I'm attacking the tank. Now here I'm going to take care of a couple of long distance enemies, but you will notice that there is a little bug where some of the enemies will start to respawn on the right hand side. Once you've cleared them, use a massive amount of solar damage to clear this whole area of shanks. You can see I kill almost all of them with one solar Polaris Lance shot. If you don't kill them with one shot, you can just use Polaris Lance and try to hit those servitors with a couple of shots, and that will make everything explode. As always, dodge reload if you need to get your ammo back, and while you're still radiant, try to melee the walker and then use your super to cook that walker. If you're lucky enough and you can get more scorch stacks on the servitors down below to the right, as well as use your super, you can actually get that tank killed a little bit faster as well. But what you want to do is maximize staying in cover when you can and clearing all these enemies. If you get stuck by one of those mines, just move into cover again. Some people also like to go behind the walker and do damage there. That works great. With your mountaintop, do as much damage as you can from the side, but don't get too close because it can kill you with that. Luckily, if you just hit it with a couple of mountaintop shots, it will go away pretty easily and you can move on to the next section. Here you have your choice. You can either continue to use Polaris Lance or you can change to Sunshot. It's your call, whatever you want to do. I do find that Sunshot's a little bit easier to spread those solar ignitions in these tighter spaces now that you don't have wide open areas. It can make a difference, but if you don't want to allow the amount of time to switch to your menu, I know that some people on previous generation consoles sometimes complain about that, or people who use hard drives on their PCs. Sometimes switching to a menu does not go very quickly. I really recommend, if you can, making sure that you have an SSD or an external SSD where you have your Destiny installed. That will allow your menu to load really quickly, and it's really just a minimum expense to have that set up. It's a really good tip for console players. Now in that area, you just clear those enemies as quickly as possible using your Sunshot or your LMG. Here's a little trick. You can actually jump over these boxes here and get a little bit more speed instead of going all the way around, even though I hit my head there. No big deal. And here we just want to cook these enemies as quickly as possible. Do note that sometimes some of these railings are actually able to be shot through and sometimes they're not. You just kind of have to know from experience what you can shoot. But the more you can just use your Sunshot to get solar ignitions to spawn up and to not get stopped by those mines and just push through them, the better things will be. Here, some people like to cook all these enemies right away. Some people like to get behind them. It's up to you. The other thing that's great about using a Sunshot or a Polaris Lance on this instead of an exotic weapon somewhere else is that you can get lots of heavy ammo, which is really important because that will allow us to change to our sword and use that to speed through some different sections. For example, in here, we're going to use our sword swipes to actually go a little bit faster through these areas. What I mean by that is when we have to crouch like this, we can actually use our sword to go through this area a little bit faster than we normally would. I'm going to cover the legend version of the jumping puzzle, and I'll put a normal version of the jumping puzzle a little bit later on in the video. But what I've found works really well here is using their mountaintop tech to skip a critical area where you have to go hit some switches. Bungie put some captains there that are very hard to kill, but the truth is you don't need to go activate those switches unless if you're hitting the first set of switches for the puzzle. What you're going to use is a mountaintop, but you'll notice here it didn't work because I was on sticky grenades. Put yourself on implosion grenades instead, jump up just a little bit, and then when you hit your mountaintop shot, you'll jump up there and then you'll be set to go. This is very easy. Almost anybody can do this. So just take a second, make sure you've got a mountaintop. It will help significantly. Now, if you've got your super in this area, you can actually use it and speed through the section just a little bit easier. Eager Edge here, pop your super on your Warlock because you're not really going to need it. Do be careful of the ceiling because you can't bonk yourself here, but take out an enemy or two and then just dash over to the area you need to go into. Hit the captain here and then just jump through this area so that you can get to the main part of the jumping puzzle, which is the wall. The key to the wall jumping puzzle is just to keep moving forward as fast as you possibly can and try not to second guess yourself. If you do, you can use your air dodge to keep yourself in motion. You can also use a sword to place yourself in space. Like you can see here, I use my air dodge. I could see where I was and jump up to this section here. You can then also skip using this pipe here for just a second because it will fall down. Same thing with this platform, it will fall down here. And if you do that and practice it a couple of times, it's actually pretty easy. With a Warlock, you can air dash here, and if you're quick enough, you can actually get on that platform and keep moving. If you have your super at this moment, you can skip this jumping puzzle, or if you've got an Eager Edge sword, you can also jump through it and catch yourself and go up above. You can also use heat rises as a Warlock, but here I'm just doing it like normal. I waited a couple of seconds to not speed run this just to show that it is approachable by anybody. When you go through the door, you're going to have those two enemies right there, those exploding shanks. You can just skip them if you get around them or bait them out to the left-hand side. Not a big deal. All right, Let's talk about this next section, which is the fans. Continue following the path that you see here on screen. A lot of people struggle with the fans, but it's really, really easy. The key is just to fall right exactly where you need to go and plant yourself into the little corners of the room with the fans. I'm not really even going to engage the exploding shanks. If I put myself right in a position here, turn around and go to the next spot, if I do this for every platform, these enemies are not even going to have enough space to try and kill me. Now, they can explode if you trigger them, but if you just jump past them, you will be able to get by them without them exploding. You can see here pretty easily, I was able to get through that. If you have an eager edge sword, again, you can skip through portions of this, but again, I'm doing it normally, trying to act a little bit more like a non-speed runner, just someone who's just showing anybody how to do it. That is the title of the video. And then when you get over to this platform here, it looks like it's farther away than it is. It's actually a little bit closer, not a big deal. All right, at this point, if I haven't changed to a sword already, I'm going to change to a sword. Again, use that to speed through some different sections. If you don't have sword ammo, don't take time to go into your menu. You can use that to your advantage a little bit later on. Now, this is where we're going to deal with Trevor. Here's one of the great things about dealing with Trevor as a solo player. If you follow the path that you see here on screen right now, you will never run into Trevor. Wait for him to pass and then just follow the path that you see here on screen. If you have an eager edge sword, you can actually beat Trevor around that corner if you drop down right away. What happens is the first person who loads into this instance basically spawns Trevor in a pre-chosen location. And what happens is he just stays in motion until everybody gets through that area. So maybe if you've died to Trevor at some point because someone else been in front of you, what's happened is the path has been set and you've been killed because you don't know where Trevor is. Again, if you follow this path that you see here on screen while doing this solo, you will never see Trevor trying to kill you. Of course, you want to hit these switches that you see here on screen. I'm doing this pretty quickly. And as you go backwards, you're going to go and cut through the middle of this area to use a shortcut so you don't get killed by Trevor. You may see Trevor come across to the right-hand side, or he might be over in the right side right now. If you do see him, just let him go by you and then just chase him afterwards. Not a big deal. And in fact, I think in a certain section of this, I may actually see him as he comes out of the exit area. There's really nothing crazy to do here. Just take your time. A lot of times this electrical field can feel stressful because you're worried you're going to die to Trevor. But the truth is you're going to be fine. You just come and get close to it as possible and then move on to the next section. You may see Trevor's light throughout this section, but it's normal, not a big deal. What actually happens is that the reason we do the left side first and then the right is he goes from the left side to the right side, but then he goes back to the left and then he does the left again. So he spends a lot of time on the left-hand side section of this. Not a big deal. And I'm sure someone has actually put a path together and shown the entire path of Trevor. I'm sure there's a map of it somewhere, but for right now, don't worry about it. Just keep on moving. Now here you have two choices. You can either use mountaintop to kind of jump through everything and go a little bit faster, but I like to use this opportunity to make sure that I've got a fresh chest piece with solar reserves on and just kind of to relax before I go into the fight. If your timer is below 7 minutes, I would do whatever you can to get as quickly as you can to the next section. You can actually jump on all of the sides of the walls to go up a little bit faster, or use mountaintop tech to jump up a little bit higher like you did earlier in the video. But for now, we're going to just approach it like a normal person who's maybe not super comfortable using mountaintop tech. All right, now this is where you need to know what the threat of the day is. What you're going to do is go through the vault puzzle room. What you're going to do is find that little seal right here. You're going to know which version of the threat is the day, and then you're going to use the puzzles that are here on screen as your guide. You want to take your time, and depending on if you're doing this on legend or normal mode, the puzzle will change based on the threat of the day. You'll then be in the vault puzzle room. I'm going to put this infographic on screen. Basically, you just need to hit the switches in that area, but it does mean that you have to hit the puzzle switches earlier on in the mission. This can also be done on normal mode, and we're going to let that go for right now because this is more about the completion. As you approach this area here, you want to make sure that you have your reserves and all the weapons and the build that you need here. If you have any questions about the build, I'll put it down in the description box below so that you have all 3 of them. Make sure you reload everything and then head down to the bottom. If you have about 8 minutes, you should comfortably be able to do this with little to no stress. If you have less than 6 minutes, you're gonna have to push. At this point, just start to clear some of the enemies to the side and use whatever 4th shot of your Polaris Lance to cook that boss and get him to move from that central area as fast as possible. To save time, I don't take care of the turrets up in front. Instead, I get the boss to rotate as quickly as possible and then use my super to then do extra damage to the giant named servitor on the side. Here, I'm going to kill some of these shanks here, but if you kill all of the shanks before the boss moves, that means that they will respawn. So kill them after the boss has moved. What we're going to do here next is we're going to take a second and use this spot right here, put down a rift, and we're going to just start to cook some of these enemies here. Make sure we've cleared this, and we want a path to nail down this named servitor. What's nice is that all of the extra ignitions will start to cook all of the other enemies that are around him that he's shielding, and he'll spread those scorch stacks all around. One annoying thing that can happen is that that servitor will start to move lower and lower in the ground. If you can do it right, you can make sure that you kill all of them really quickly. Now here, if you can get some shots on those shanks that the Shrieker is protecting, cool, but the main thing you want to do, again, is get the boss to rotate to the next area around the room. Once that boss has moved, we can then focus on the servitor as well as all the enemies here. When the boss moves to that 3rd side or the right side of the boss room, there will be a ton of mines and explosives planted around the room, so you do need to watch yourself. The great part about this spot is that as long as the boss hasn't gone to his spawn location, no extra enemies will spawn up, and he's just over on the right side of the room from where you entered. You can just cook these enemies as long as you want, get all of these shanks taken care of, and if you want to, you can take care of a couple of mines as well. Luckily, all these shanks have solar shields, and once the servitor is gone, you can cook them very easily. Watch the mines and all of the explosives that will start up here. In fact, I'll take a second and clear them out in case if I need to push forward. Now here in this area, this is where I want to try and get these enemies cleared just a little bit faster, maybe have these mines go off, because I want this back area here to be safe. You'll see why a little bit later. Here in this moment, I'm going to try and move the boss to his spawn location and kill those other shanks there. If you kill the shanks right away or leave one up, then they won't respawn. There might be some enemies starting to spawn here if the boss moves to his spawn location. And I actually did a little extra damage to him. In a perfect world, you'll get him to not move, and you can actually use your Polaris Lance and cook all of the enemies as they spawn up. Here, I didn't do that. I'm trying to demonstrate like a normal person what might happen during your run. I'm going to leave those shanks on the far right side. I can always take care of them a little bit later. The most important thing, once you've gotten the boss to that side of the room and you mostly are safe, you want to get the boss to disappear, and then you need to get the walkers to spawn up. Once the walkers have spawned up, it'll take a second for them to get ready to actually start to do damage to you. So look around for ammo. If there's any heavy ammo or anything else like that released, you can start to do damage. At this point, what you want to do is hit those tanks as quickly as you can with the Dragon's Breath, and they should get killed with 1 shot apiece. If they do that, fantastic. And then you'll see the brig spawn in, and you'll be ready to do the next section. Use Dragon Breath, melee, and then go after the boss, and most importantly, the servitor who is there in the area. Ideally, you'll save some heavy ammunition so that once you're out of your super, you can use Dragon's Breath on the big giant brig and the boss to rip off his outside layer, so you can just cook the rest of it with Polaris Lance. Now, when you do this and the boss spawns in, there's going to be a bunch of explosives that are going to start chasing you. There's a reason why I'm using that back far side of the room to stay alive. There's no boxes that you can see here that can kill you. One of the main reasons why people die in this mission is because they're going to be jumping around in all the different boxes. On this difficulty, if those explosives hit even way above you, like where those boxes are, they can kill you. So here you can say I get way away from those boxes to make sure that I stay alive. I'm using a pulse rifle here. I wouldn't necessarily use this. I would use that shoot to loot scout rifle, but this had heal clip on it. And I just wanted to try it out on this run. Again, a pretty normal weapon that some people would have. What you'll want to do is jump up and try to make sure that you hit the boss with your Dragon's Breath, as well as with Mountaintop to rip off his outside layer. Once it's to about 40%, you can then switch to your other build, but you can see the threat of that right now. Those explosives are trying to chase you, and doing it out in the open can be dangerous. So try to switch when those explosives have targeted you, move to a quick safe spot, and then quickly change loadouts. At that point, just start spamming all of your Mountaintop shots. The great part about this back area, as long as you're strafing and continuing to move, those explosives shouldn't hit you. Try again to stay away from those boxes, because those boxes will be the thing that kill you. The great part now that his section is open that can be hit with the crit spots is that when he tries to fire at you, one, you can either use Polaris Lance explosions and ignitions to stun him like you just saw on screen, or if he tries to hit you with his attack that he's prepping right now, he won't be able to because you're too far away. The main thing you need to watch out for is the explosions that come from the air. Just keep moving, and if you need to, pop a healing grenade. Once the brig is toast, the rest of this is easy, especially if you've got a little bit of heavy ammo left. All of the shots from the sky will stop once the brig is toast, and then you can just mop up all of the different enemies. You've probably got about 2 minutes to about 30 seconds to do this. All you have to do is clear all of the shanks and all of the snipers and marauders. Just make sure that if you're trying to do this flawlessly, that you double check, because things in here can still kill you, like the snipers. You can see here I hide for just a second as I run out of ammo, and then I can finish up the rest of the snipers. Do watch out for any enemies that are cloaked in this area. They can kill you, and they can attack you with swords. Luckily in this area, I've killed most of them. I'm just double checking left and right as well, because there might be a couple of little enemies around, and that's all you need to do to solo 0 hour. All it takes is a little bit of time, a little bit of practice, going after the jumping puzzle, and you too can solo flawless this, as well as help other people get it done. If you have any questions, make sure you stop on over at twitch.tv/manodestra, where I do tons of helps inside of Destiny 2, including raid, exotic missions, and other things like that. Join the Discord. We have that linked down in the description box below. That's where you can ask questions when I'm not on stream or not making a YouTube video, and you can join our community and come say hi as we get ready for the final shape. Good hunting, Guardians. I'll see you next time in the universe of Destiny.